Okay guys, this is hopefully a quick video just on one problem that some of us may have with the LCD monitor, okay, and particularly into this VO pin, okay. So it's pin 3, depending on if your LCD has these pins handily labelled, but you'll usually see pin 1 there and pin 16, so you know which way it is to go, but pin 1's on the left, provided your LCD is the right way around. So look, VO is your contrast display, or essentially the brightness in the LCD. So if we just have a quick look at me, I'm actually turning this dial here on the potentiometer. You can see the brightness or the contrast coming into effect as I go from the max to the min, and then we sort of find a sweet spot there in the middle, okay? So on some of these setups, depending, as I said, a lot of them can look very similar, but depending on the exact model of the LCD, what I've been able to do with my one is I could just tie it directly to ground, and that would actually give me the maximum contrast, and I'd be able to essentially read the text. Now with some of them, we have found if you tie it to ground, it'll give it too much contrast and you'll not be able to read it, okay? So it's important in that sense then to make sure that we find basically the correct voltage that's needed there to set the contrast correctly. So we can do that very easily with a potentiometer, and look, we know how to wire in our potentiometer. You just need to give it a ground supply and a power supply to either of its two edge legs, and then the middle leg is your analog out, and then that'll change depending on the dial, and then you can just keep that in your circuit if you wish. Just note we're using the 3.3 voltage supply there. Remember, we still have 5 volts up here, so that's the analog out, and you could just keep that in your circuit if you want, and then you could have that functionality for your LCD that the user can increase or decrease the brightness depending, or the contrast depending on, you know, the time of day or things like that, as the background light changes. But you may, you know, need your potentiometer for a different part of your circuit, and if you've only one, then it can be awkward, and you may want just a more permanent set point, okay? So I'll show you a couple of ways to do that. Essentially, this is just a change to the wiring diagram that we've done. Okay, we've put the potentiometer in, we've just given it the 3.3 volt rail, and you could try it out with the 5 volt rail, but again, you're just going to look for that sort of sweet spot where the voltage is just right to give you the right contrast. But if you measure that voltage at that sweet point, or measure the resistance, whatever way you want to do it, you could set up a potential divider circuit, voltage divider circuit with 2 resistors, in case you needed this potentiometer for something else in your circuit. So this is an example of one. Now I've put in just these 2 resistors. You may have to change these depending on what voltage you want to give it, or what set point you want to give it. But all we have here is a voltage divider, so 2 resistors in series. We have one connected to the 3.3 power rail, the other one to ground, and then just in the sort of midsection between those 2 resistors, that's where the voltage will be divided, and we can take that out and connect that into VO. So that would give us a stable set point that we could use that would keep the contrast set at that particular value indefinitely, rather than having the ability to change it here. So you could work out, we've got quick maths on your voltage divider circuit, which you would have learned in your electronics, so you can work that out nice and quickly, and you could tweak these values of the resistors depending on what you would like to put in, or what set point you'd like to use, and you can measure it off the 3.3 volt line or the 5 volt line if you wish. Both of them are handily available, and you could actually, it's nice to see it just kind of wired out this way, because it would look like the diagram you'd probably learn for your voltage divider circuit, but you could probably cut down on some of the wires and do something a little bit fancier to wire it up easier than having so many wires, but it's quite nice like that. So look, that's two ways of doing it. Depending on the LCD, you might not just get away with tying that VO, that's your contrast display, to ground. So you may have to put in a potentiometer, or you may have to do a voltage divider circuit, depending on what setup you'd like to go for.